Welcome to episode 5 of Running on OCP, where we speak with organizations using open compute in a variety of ways, including end users, software companies, as well as other entities who align with OCP tenets. This week, I speak with Jeroen Burks, who is the CEO of Blockheating, as well as Erik Riedel, the Senior VP of Engineering for ITRenew. Now, this is a great story between two companies coming together to drive sustainability. Blockheating is based in the Netherlands, and they are recycling data center energy to heat greenhouses across the Netherlands, as well as offering bare metal IT services from those units. And when you combine that with ITRenew, who is a platinum member within OCP, who really specializes in providing circular economy based hyperscale hardware to the enterprise. It's a great example of how the community can come together to drive this industry forward, specifically around circular economy and sustainability. So this is a great story. I hope you enjoy my conversation today with Jeroen and Erik. It's my pleasure today to speak with Jeroen Burks, the CEO of Blockheating, based in the Netherlands, as well as Erik Riedel, the Senior VP of Engineering for our Platinum member ITRenew. Thank you, Jeroen and Erik, for joining me today.
Great to be here.
Thanks, Steve.
So let's start off with some intros. Jeroen, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background and how you started Blockheating.
Yeah, well, it started, I think, like my bigger journey started about 10 years ago with applied physics. Really loved physics, trying to explain everything that happens in the world, or at least the technical part of the world. Really loved that, but missed somehow the real world application of that. So later on switched to business administration to like really link technology to ideally a paying customer. So finished my master's in business administration and like somehow ended up in recycling IT hardware. So not really the IT space, but more almost the scrap metal space. Try to recycle old fans, old power supplies. Someone's now charging his tractor with an old blade center power supply. I love those things. Find a new purpose for some hardware. And in 2018, ended up with a fellow entrepreneur who was redoing how do you call it, commercial real estate, and he asked me like, do you have a solution for my heating problem? And yeah, that's basically how it kicked off. We started with 2 server racks in the basement and really big holes throughout the building, and just blowing the heat in. Of course, summertime that wasn't too convenient, so we switched to the idea of building smaller units and putting it on several locations. And I think like everyone here has played with Legos in his past, and it still fascinates me that you have a few pieces and you stack them together and you have something that's bigger than the single pieces that you had. So taking that from the Lego perspective, if we have multiple small data centers and are able to connect them, they can build something bigger than just the small data centers. So block in the sense of using those blocks, and heating in the sense that one of our main goals was to recycle the heat.
So that's great. So that's how you came up with the name Blockheating then, is with the kind of the Lego methodology or theories.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. And Erik, tell, for those of you in the community who may not be aware of Erik, please, Erik, introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So going back a similar distance as Jeroen. So I spent 9 of the last 10 years at EMC and then Dell after the merger, building rack scale appliances for on-premise clouds. before that, I spent some time at Seagate HP as well. But in that time, we watched the evolution of the clouds and the large scale service providers and what's now commonly referred to as hyperscale. And we saw during that time period that it wasn't just the largest cloud providers that had needs for expanded computing, more efficient computing, and so on. So we all know that there's lots of computers in lots of locations all around the world. And for the last year and a half, I've been with ITRenew trying to bring that hyperscale technology to a wider audience. So we work with companies such as Blockheating. We also work with medium-sized to large and small service providers around the world, or in Europe, in the Americas at the moment. And trying to bring the promise and the technology of hyperscale computing to various locations, right? So the efficiency gain, the simplicity, and the open collaboration that have always been part of OCP. So we're very glad that we were able to bring a solution to Blockheating as well.
Yeah, this is. I've been looking forward to this discussion because the business model is very, very interesting. And the Jeroen, for those of people that may not be familiar with the services, tell us about the size of Blockheating, the services you offer, and then how you came up with the idea to use edge data centers for heating greenhouses.
Okay, I'll start with the beginning. So what we offer on one side is heating as a service for a greenhouse. That might not be the site you were referring to. Basically, on the IT side, what we're offering is bare metal IT space. What we've identified, of course, is that then we get a bit technical. Our cooling method is direct chip cooling, and that is a lot of customers in the co-location space are hesitant to switch cooling method. So we said, okay, what if we own the hardware, we modify it, and we can leverage that at our location. So basically, we offer bare metal as a service, preferably from one rack and up. And like in our general idea, it is the goal to spread out the resources over multiple locations. And basically what we're doing is we're building small hubs with at least 3 data centers. So I think that's the most interesting proposition, whereas someone rents 3 racks in one hub, distributed amongst 3 data centers. These data centers are like placed 1 or 2 kilometers apart. So IT-wise, it's still one data center, but hardware-wise, cooling-wise, and power-wise, redundancy-wise, it's 3 different locations. And I think that's our main offering.
Interesting. So it's 3. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you also asked about the size. So typically we put 9 server racks in a small data center, so we can go up to, I think, 150, 180 kilowatts on one location.
And how did you decide on that particular size of container? Erik, did you have some input there as well? How did you come up with the number of 9?
So we certainly provided advice on the density that was possible. As you know, Steve, it's ultimately down to the total amount of kW, and the biggest pressure then becomes the cooling, right? Once you have enough electrons in the container, then the question is, how do you get the resulting heat out, right? So certainly the innovation of the cooling was important to that from Jeroen's side.
Great. Now I want to tackle this up front because Jeroen, you said one word that is always probably raises some questions in people's minds, is when you said, well, we modified the hardware, and that always makes people nervous. If they're going to modify it, what happens to the warranty and the support? So I want to tackle that up front, and then we'll get to some other questions in the back. But how have you modified it? You said you moved it over to some liquid cooling, but then Erik, over to you about how you handled the support of something that they've modified.
Okay, so starting with the modifications that we do is, so we take the existing air coolers off, replace that with a full copper water cooling solution, and like on the software level, we also have to make sure that the fan controller knows that it cannot control the full cooling scope anymore.
Yeah, and from our side, Steve, so we're very comfortable. We work with multiple of our customers to kind of customize solutions. We have another service provider customer that also modifies our servers for water cooling, and so we're very comfortable working with customers on those types of modifications. We did a round of prototyping and proof of concept with Jeroen and the team last year. So we're very comfortable with the modifications, and so we're able to support and warranty that in the with the usual expectations. So we've worked together in making those designs, so we're comfortable that that this can function at high reliability and for extended time periods.
That's good. So moving over to say from the technical aspects a little bit over to some of your vision, Jeroen, when you started Blockheating, you outline your vision into, say, 3 categories: the reuse of energy, decentralization of servers, and efficient cooling. So out of those, 2 out of those 3 are really around sustainability. So how are you and why are you putting sustainability at the core of your vision?
Yeah, I don't know. That's it might be just me, or it might be that I'm Dutch. Like I hate wasting money, and I hate wasting resources. It's yeah, especially in these times, I save boxes. I save the filling material in case you need to send something out later on. So yeah, that's something that I think is naturally part of me, part of being Dutch. Um, and yeah, as I mentioned, I started recycling hardware, and yeah, at some point in time, I had about 1 megawatt of hardware in my warehouse, and it really triggered me. Like, okay, where does all this heat usually go to? Like, and then you find out that for a data center, heat is a waste product. Like they're actively trying to get rid of it. Yeah, and that tripped something in me and said, like, there must be a way. And in the end, it's a technical optimization, and it's not a like technically it's perfectly possible. It's just that like everything up to now has been water cooling or air cooling, well, most of it, and that's simply a economic optimization. Like it's easier to build a data center air cooled because yeah, it doesn't matter who comes in, they can bring in their own server, etc. But if you take control of a little bit more of that ecosystem, yeah, then this is by far the best solution, technology wise and economically wise.
So as you started to view the data center as heat byproduct, then how did you get connected with ITRenew? Because they have their model fits very, very well with your vision. So how did that relationship come about?
Yeah, I think they might be on my radar even when I started recycling hardware. Um, yeah, if you are looking for like hyperscaler hardware at some scale, then I think a lot of the people will point you to ITRenew.
And Erik, just so people are clear, you don't just take the racks out of hyperscalers and then roll them right across the street. You guys do a lot of work to make sure that those are enterprise ready. So talk through how you take something from a current hyperscale data center and how that ends up to somebody like Jeroen.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, so we have the core business of ITRenew. Like we've been in business for almost 20 years. Has been repurposing of data center equipment, right? And for the last 10 years, it's been focused on the various hyperscale clients that we have. So we will typically process between 65 and 85,000 servers per month on behalf of our hyperscale clients. And that's the core material base from which we build the Sesame kind of rack scale solutions. And as you said, yeah, we don't just kind of roll the racks from one corner to another corner. So we kind of inventory everything that's in the racks. Usually the drives, the hard drives and the flash drives have been removed because they contain end user data. So they've been scrubbed in various ways and also potentially put back in the supply chain. And then we will take all the components apart, do individual validation testing on those, replace anything that is mechanical. For example, fans that may have experienced a wear phenomenon, or other components that there are not a lot of components in a server rack that have a wear phenomenon, but the ones that do, maybe some of the power supplies with fans inside and so on. So we do individual tests, then we reassemble those systems, put in new drives, new flash drives or new HDD where that's relevant. And do a full kind of node level test process, and then finally a rack level integration. So we put in the power supplies and the bus bars and all the nodes, switching, etc. Fully cable everything, right? All the power cables are taken care of, all the network cables, network interface cards, and make sure that the firmware is compatible across that entire rack. And then do a rack level test. For some of our customers, we also help them to load the software while it's still in our factories. But for other customers, once the system gets to the site, then we'll work with them on site to also make sure that the infrastructure software is deployed. So yeah, it's definitely a multi-step process with a lot of expertise brought to bear.
And the racks show up and then they're put in the container, or do they get put in the container and then the entire container is shipped?
So in the case of Jeroen, so he Blockheating does the integration on site. We have another collaboration that we've worked with PCX, where we have the model of putting one of their containers outside of our production facilities and putting the racks directly in. So we can support either model. In the case of Blockheating, they're putting the racks into the containers on site.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So back to the business model. Yeah, go ahead, Jeroen.
Yeah, like our solution is not really a container. It's like built from the ground up. So it's a bit wider and a bit higher and a bit shorter, and that makes it really difficult to transport that. So that's why we said just ship the racks, and we can now lift the racks in front of the door and then roll them in.
Okay, great. So they come fully loaded, and then your design is a bit unique. Then it's not a standardized container.
Yeah, exactly. And like after we first roll them in, we test them, everything, and then we take them out by the 10 and then modify them to be liquid cooled, and then they get redeployed.
Ah, okay. And back to the business model then, when you're working in horticulture, how does the relationship work with the owner of the greenhouse? How is that business model work?
Yeah, so that's I think it's really a how do you call it? This symbiotic relationship. You both need each other. So that's where we said, okay, on the price point, we simply want you. We want that this is the best offer you're getting. They have multiple modes of heating, like with a typical boiler, with cogeneration. And for us, it's beneficial, of course, if they prefer our heat to be used in the first place. So we said, yeah, we can go on a very competitive price on that, as long as you take it all. Yeah, and I think horticulturists are, at least here in the Netherlands, very welcoming. Like they're also trying to go gasless, but yeah, their operations are on another scale. So yeah, they're really looking forward to different solutions. Yeah, so they're really interested, and yeah, basically we said, okay, if we can charge a little bit for the heat, then the rest of the cost is our business.
Right. And if you could share any just general numbers, how much less expensive is this type of heat compared to other forms of heat, or how much is the greenhouse operator saving by using your solution?
Well, typically a kilowatt hour of heat in the Netherlands for a greenhouse will be around 1 cent to 0.7 cents. And I believe we're now at 0.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you put it into perspective, for the cost of electricity, that's about 10%.
Right. And then you're saving even more on your other side of business with the CapEx using the circular economy type of hardware as opposed to legacy or traditional hardware.
Yeah, exactly. So using the second-hand hardware, and I think especially OCP hardware, is also helping us. Like in a typical data center, of course, heat production is is like the major factor to decide your upgrades on. Like for us, that's a whole different optimization point. Like we could place another data center with a different cost of putting 9 racks extra in your typical data center. So our whole business optimization is different in that perspective.
And how has you'd mentioned that the Netherlands in general are very focused on sustainability, and that's true in many of your other businesses throughout the Netherlands. Has the public sector been supportive in promoting or accelerating your type of business model?
Yeah, definitely. Like we, as mentioned, we started somewhere in 2018, and basically with like mostly grants and some private money, we're now able to build 2 full data centers with hardware in it. So yeah, that's they're really supportive about it.
And Erik, the type of liquid cooling that they're doing, or the type of modifications that you've done, is Blockheating one of the only customers that's doing something like this, or do you have other customers leveraging your experience in that liquid cooled
Yeah,
solution?
so we have another customer, service provider customer, that is deployed actively with liquid cooling. It's an expertise that they have, that they've used to apply to our nodes as well. We are also working in partnership with a couple of other companies in the ecosystem on immersion cooled systems, which would be another step beyond the liquid cooling of just the CPUs, and also working with a company called Cloud and Heat in Germany that also does water cooling, liquid cooling. So we're definitely working within the ecosystem to make it a widely used or an accessible technology for other companies that want to make a similar optimization.
Yeah, it's all of these stories, all the fun stories seem to be coming out of Europe. So any idea as to why that is, Jeroen and Erik? Why do all the fun sustainability stories come out of Europe?
Erik, you first?
Well, so I would say from our perspective, we also have kind of immersion customers in the U.S. We have a couple of customers that are kind of being creative in the way that they generate the electricity, or that they consume the electricity close to where it's generated. So when the economic benefit is clear, I think we see just as much interest in the Americas as we do in Europe. So that's been our experience over the last 12 months.
Yeah, I think in general, like our cost of heating or cost of electricity is quite high in the Netherlands. So that might over in Europe, especially Actually, like if you go to Germany, it's even higher. So I think that might be a big driver. And what really helps is in Europe, or at least the Netherlands, is fiber connections are really easily available. So we only have to dig 2 kilometers and we're at a fiber connection. And I can imagine that in the US, that's quite different. So there, the optimization might be very different.
Yeah, I think Steve, it's exactly the optimization that that we see our other customers going through, right? What is the distance to the fiber? How can you get kind of low latency connecting to the rest of the computing world, right? Then what is the cost of power? So again, we have customers that are locating in low power cost or renewable energy locations. And then finally, kind of how do you deal with the cooling infrastructure, right? The maybe some advantages sometimes in the U.S. is that the space is available, so you can use kind of large scale warehouses with air cooling. But there is still an advantage from an efficiency perspective, as Jeroen already said, from using water as the cooling medium rather than trying to do everything with air, even if you have the space for for large volumes of air and large air transport, right? So I think it's a multi-way optimization, but we're very comfortable that we have multiple customers where the economics is compelling in the same ways that it is for block heating, even in the Americas.
And besides horticulture, Jeroen, what other use cases are you exploring? I know that you have a few other partnerships, and is ITRenew part of those additional forward-thinking use cases as well?
Yeah, we really see these two markets as two totally separate markets. Like I can try to explain to my horticulturist what we're doing, and he really gives me a real blank stare. And on the other side, if you explain this to an ITer, usually they say, it's a nice purpose, but they're not really connected to it. So we really see it as two totally different businesses. And yeah, of course, we're looking into like at what places we can use the heat as well effectively. Of course, swimming pools, saunas, bigger communities with how do you call it? Heat distribution systems. That would work really good. And of course, what you see going to the a bit more south is that the recycling of the heat becomes less of an issue and less of a goal, and reducing the PUE becomes the main goal of the hardware solution.
And the type of workloads that you're running in your other side of business, is that a lot of open source software as well, or more traditional workloads?
I would say it's hard to calculate that on the spot. I think we're both looking at like VMware as well as OpenStack. So I think about 75% will be open source and 25% closed source, maybe.
Okay. And Erik, do you see that percentages playing out across the people that you're working with, or are they migrating more toward open source or traditional? What are you seeing in the market?
We definitely see an uptake on the open side, right? There's a lot of advantages from that ecosystem, in the hardware space, as there has been in the software space. So I would say that it's definitely a significant majority that are tending in the open side.
Great. Well, I really appreciate the time that you guys have spent sharing what's happening within block heating. This is really an interesting use case, and I've enjoyed watching ITRenew work with your team and telling this story. And I had one last question, Jeroen. Do the tomatoes grown in these greenhouses that are using reusable heat, do they taste any better?
Definitely.
Yeah, that's
Like,
what
of course, we are located at the horticulturist with the best tomatoes in the country. Yeah, unfortunately, we are still a small part of the heating demand. So, with one data center, we can heat up about 2 hectares of greenhouse in the summer, and they have 12. So, um, but you taste that little 1/6 of the tomato being extra sweet.
I like it. Any final thoughts, Jeroen, Erik?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize again, kind of Steve, from your side, from the OCP and the collaboration, the community. I mean, this is really the only way, in my experience, certainly the most efficient way that these types of projects can get done. Right? This is how we find each other and how we can collaborate at what can often be a quite detailed and significant technical level. Of course, without openness, there's also possibilities for different technologies and different companies to find each other. But it's just so much easier when there's an open ecosystem and an open exchange, and we can bring the best ideas forward, and we can find new ideas that we wouldn't have thought of on our own or just in bilateral discussions, right? So the open community is certainly an important driver for what we're doing.
Agreed.
Yeah, can't disagree with that. It's yeah, it really helps us that we have um, much more access to like what's really happening inside. Um, it's really an added benefit for us, and like a bit closer to my heart is simply the fact that we're not wasting tons of scrap metal on covers and on drive bays, etc., and trying to keep it clean, having one rack with just 6 power supplies. Every time I see it and every time I take a customer with me, they're really happy to see that you can fill a rack with 40 servers and not have 80 power cables running at the back. That's, I think that's amazing.
I love the simplicity and the passion, especially the passion coming from the team at ITRenew. You guys are doing some fantastic things around circular economy and becoming a much more active within the project itself. We have a new sustainability initiative, which your team is going to be helping to co-lead as well. So my thanks again to Jeroen from Blockheating and Erik from ITRenew. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Great. And I'll be back with my key takeaways from my conversation with Jeroen and Erik in just a minute. So a lot of great takeaways from my conversation today with Jeroen and Erik. The first is how Jeroen was able to take more control of his ecosystem by owning the hardware, and how much he hates waste. So it's really great to speak with someone whose core is sustainability in the way that they're building their business. I also found it really interesting that you could tell the partnership that is formed between Blockheating and ITRenew and the way that they've worked together. Jeroen modifying the hardware for direct chip cooling and ITRenew supporting that effort. And the way that Erik highlighted that the only way that these type of projects can happen is through a community effort. So you can really see the community on display between Blockheating and ITRenew. So my thanks again to the team at Blockheating as well as ITRenew. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to introduce you to Erik at ITRenew or Jeroen from Blockheating. Thanks again for listening.